Tell me these games are easy. One more time, I will fight you. Yo, what's up everybody? This is Junior Chicken here. I'm trying out a different formula for this countdown so I can hopefully cut time on editing and produce this video a lot faster. I'm also changing up the topic to something with a bit more variety to it. There are plenty of Pokemon that we have a lot of love and appreciation for. We always like to have them on our teams when we can. But then there's the Pokemon that we do want to like, but they aren't good enough in our eyes to get the attention that we want to give them. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on for this countdown. My top 10 disappointing Pokemon. These are Pokemon that I feel have some missed potential, or they're Pokemon that I used to like that haven't aged well, or just haven't been able to have the traits that I need for a Pokemon to be desirable, I guess. These Pokemon still have plenty of good traits to them, it's just that their detriments lead to them being underwhelming and often overlooked. I don't think I need to explain it further than that. Let's get to it with my top 10 disappointing Pokemon. For those of you keeping track of my favorite Pokemon countdowns, the next one is going to be about the fighting type, which is appropriate because the foot end of this countdown contains the very Pokemon that got me into the fighting type in the first place. That being Hitmonlee. I mean, look at it. It's got a pretty cool design. A lot cooler than the other Hitmons. Hitmonchan is basically a boxer, and Hitmontop is a top, but Hitmonlee, I know he's supposed to be a kicking Pokemon based off of Bruce Lee, but his design is actually not really based off much and looks more like a monster rather than a humanoid or an object. Unfortunately, looks can only get you so far. It's got some pretty solid attack and special defense, but unfortunately it has poor defense and HP, and its speed is just aight. I mean, it is pretty cool that it can learn plenty of fighting type attacks naturally, but when you take that and TMs into consideration, it's a fairly typical coverage for a fighting type, aside from maybe Blaze Kick and a few of its move tutor moves. I will admit it can be used fairly effectively in competitive battling with its normal gym, fake out plus unburden combo to turn it into a pretty awesome sweeper. I still would prefer Gallade though, because it has a more diverse attack move pool, as well as priority Shadow Sneak, which actually allows to have some weakness coverage as well. I think the worst part about Hitmonlee though is its evolution tree. You see, Tyrogue has 3 possible evolutions. In order to get Hitmonlee, you have to have Tyrogue's attack stat strictly higher than its defense stat at level 20 in order to get Hitmonlee. Otherwise, you'll end up with one of the other 2 Hitmon Pokemon. And while this may be just fine for players who can track IVs very easily, for casual players, it's kind of annoying. Sorry Hitmonlee, I'm gonna have to stick with Machamp as my favorite Gen 1 fighting type. Thank you very much. As much as I appreciate Generation 4, there are still plenty of Pokemon that came from that generation that I wish I could like a lot more, and Luxray is definitely one of them. In fact, I don't even know if it still qualifies as one of my favorite electric type. Luxray is a real cool looking lynx-like Pokemon with the black fur and the blue skin, and looks very menacing and fearsome. And it is really reflected in its attack stat, which is very solid, as well as the abilities Rivalry and Guts, which can power up its attack stat. But unfortunately, Game Freak decided to waste a bunch of points in its special attack stat, leaving it with awkward defenses and lower speed than what you'd usually expect from an electric type, with no way to boost its speed whatsoever. Okay, so there is a way to boost Luxray's speed, and that's through Z-Electric Terrain, but that does mean you have to have it hold a specific item and be taught a specific move, so it's still a bit of a handicap. Creds to just Weave Off for this clip though. Also, when I say increase its speed, I mean on its own and not through the help of an item like a Choice Scarf. Sure, Intimidate and Charge can help out its defenses a bit, but its move pool doesn't help in the slightest, having very limited type coverage in its physical attacks. Yes, you can teach it superpower through a move tutor, but by far one of its best moves, Ice Fang, is an egg move. There's a big reason why I like Electivire more. Sure, it has weak defenses and it's not the fastest electric type out there, but it can have a way of boosting its speed and has a lot better type coverage. And I know this has been said time and time again, but it would be so cool to have Luxray as a dark type. The black fur and its ability to see through walls really speaks to that type. And that's one of the big reasons why people want a Mega Evolution, so it can gain that typing and be better than what it currently is. You know Pokemon is awesome when its cries sounds like an electric guitar. Right, Archeops? Yeah, Archeops is another fossil Pokemon that's rock flying, but it's far enough removed from Aerodactyl that it can stand on its own. Kinda like a bird-reptile hybrid kind of thing. I also kinda like how its national dex is the exact same as its base stat total. In fact, Archeops has by far the best base stat total out of all the fossil Pokemon. It's got some really great physical attack as well as some solid speed. And its attack move pool has some creative type coverage in Bug and Dragon. So you're probably wondering why there aren't people going, screw the Helix fossil, it's the Plume fossil that is our real savior. It was cursed from the very beginning with a little known ability called Defeatus. Basically, once its HP gets cut in half, so does its attack stats. And considering that its defenses aren't anything to write home about, this is very crippling towards its battle prominence, especially since there's no moves that can counteract this. And even though Archeops is pretty fast, there are still plenty of popular sweepers that are faster than it. If a Pokemon can outspeed it, take a hit and then return a hit back, or simply have a priority move, Archeops is pretty much done. And as much as I hate to say it, Aerodactyl is still the better rock flying type. Sure, it's not as offensively powerful, but it's definitely faster, plus Aerodactyl can get Fire Fang, Thunder Fang, and Ice Fang within its natural move pool alone, which right away gives it a much bigger advantage. So I was thinking of putting Sceptile on this countdown, maybe just to piss off MNJTV and see how mad he would get at me putting his favorite Pokemon on here, but looking back at it, Sceptile isn't too bad. The fact that Sceptile learns Swords Dance does mean you can tap into its physical attack pool. Plus, its Mega Evolution papered over a lot of cracks that it originally had before Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. However, there's another grass type from Generation 3 that I liked that didn't quite live up to my expectations. And of course, I'm talking about Roselia. Roselia is a really well-made Rose Pokemon. It has plenty of support moves as a grass type should. Unfortunately though, its move pool is fairly typical in the type of coverage you get for a grass poison type. There are a few creative moves thrown here and there with Shadow Ball, Extrasensory through breeding, and Dazzling Gleam, but not much to really take care of its weaknesses. On top of that, it still doesn't quite compare to the other grass poison types. Thankfully, it does have a baby form, which is appropriately adorable in Bidoof, and its evolution, Roserade, actually it packs some pretty good power. But Roserade doesn't add too much already to what Roselia has, so, you know, every rose has its thorn. Just like Hitmonlee, Golem is a Gen 1 Pokemon that has not aged well. Honestly, I kind of blame that on its pre-evolutions. I mean, Geodude, while cool on paper, is mainly just a rock with a face and arms. And Graveler has become a Pokemon that is quite despised thanks to its sturdy and self-destruct combos that you often find in caves. Don't worry, I find them as killjoys too. But then you get to its final form, and it still doesn't quite compare to the other trait evolutions in Generation 1. Alakazam is really cool, Machamp is this beast that's super powerful and can hit anything without batting an eye, and freaking Gengar, you know he's one of my favorites. I mean, Golem does have some pretty solid attack and defense, making it a good kind of physical roadblock if you want it, but unfortunately it comes with the ground rock type. This means you're 4 times weak to 2 of the starter types, those of course being water and grass, and considering that it doesn't have special defenses that are really good and it's pretty slow, you can see how this can be a problem. On top of that, its move pool is typical for a rock and ground type. Sure, it does have a few unique moves like Steamroller, but once again, some of the moves that can really help it, such as Fire Punch and Thunder Punch, are exclusive to the move tutor. Rhyperior is probably a better Pokemon because it has diverse attack move pool, as well as better HP, attack and defense, as well as the filter ability to mitigate its weaknesses. It's fighting a losing battle here, especially considering the fact that Generation 5 introduced Gigalith, who, while just being a rock type with a bit of a bland move pool, just keeps getting better and better every generation to the point where in Generation 7 it has an 80 special defense, which isn't too bad, and the Sandstream ability to boost its special defense even higher to go along with its already pretty high defense stat. So you can see why Golem just keeps rolling down the hill and I just let it roll down. Although I will say its Alolan form is actually pretty creative, being a electric rock type and having a bit more of a interesting move pool as a result. In fact, it might even be able to take some ground type attacks thanks to its pretty high defense. I gotta say, I really enjoyed the selection of Pokemon we got in Generation 7. And I have a whole countdown dedicated to that, so you can check that out at the end of this video if you'd like. But not necessarily all the Alolan Pokemon are winners. Oricorio was one of the Pokemon I wanted to like the most. It's a bird based off of different dance styles, which I'm quite fond of, being someone who dances for fun. On top of that, it has an ability called Dancer and a signature move called Revolution Dance. You would think this would be my Pokemon, but apparently not. There are 2 big factors that ended up being huge dampeners when training Oricorio. The first being that I thought each form of Oricorio was permanent. You got that Pokemon and it stayed that form, depending on which region you got it. But no, you can actually change its form and its typing. Each region has a specific nectar, and giving Oricorio the nectar turns it into the type corresponding with the color of that nectar. The second dampener is there's very little performance differences between the 4 Oricorio forms, which is a real shame considering how unique each of the forms look. You would think that their battle properties would be at least somewhat different other than their type, but no. Also, their stat distribution is pretty boring. There's really not much interesting about this Pokemon's battle capabilities, especially considering how dull its attack coverage is. The main type of attacks it can learn are normal and flying. Of course, this excludes Revolution Dance and the possible hidden power it has, but come on. There's only 3 other moves that have a different type, those being U-Turn, Steel Wing, and Icy Wind. Could they at least thought of a much more creative move pool? Especially considering it doesn't learn a lot of dance moves, which is the whole point of Dancer. And yes, I understand that Dancer does allow you to copy dance moves, which can be helpful for boosting stats, but when repeating certain dance attacks, it really doesn't make sense to do so considering that the Pokemon who will likely use that attack is already resisting it. And yeah, you can definitely see some potential in it being a baton passer, but when it comes to being a special sweeper, you can find plenty of examples of the same type that are better than Oricorio. Sensu Form Oricorio only has Drifblim to compete with, which is more of an HP loaded Pokemon with good offense, but that's only one of the 4 forms that actually can be okay at being a special sweeper. As you may have known from my top 10 favorite fire Pokemon countdown, I'm a big fan of Arcanine. It's probably my favorite dog Pokemon hands down, and thus you're probably wondering what I think about Houndoom. I will say, the design is spot on for being a fire dark type with the whole Hellhound design. But unfortunately, its battle capabilities have more to be desired, I guess. It does have a pretty good special attack, and its speed is decent as well as its defense not so much. On top of that, its move pool isn't too much exciting either. Most of the moves it can learn are either fire, dark, or normal. The other moves do include a few poison type attacks which don't really add too much to the type coverage, Solar Beam, which is usually good but of course you have to wait a turn to use it, and Dream Eater, which does allow you to take care of fighting types, but you can only use it when a Pokemon is sleeping, so it's kinda useless. And while it does have a bit more type coverage in its physical attacks, its special attack is better, so it kinda puts the decent attack stat to waste. I'm just saying, if you were to choose between Howl or Nasty Plot for your offensive setup, which one would you pick? Even Houndoom's Mega Evolution, which, while better performance-wise, is still fairly disappointing. Yes, they did patch up the defenses very well, give it even better speed and special attack, as well as solar power to make it even better at special attacking, giving it more bones for its Mega Evolution, as well as a few more design tweaks, didn't quite do it for me. In fact, I know a lot of people who wanted Houndoom to become a Cerberus when it evolved. And while I do think a Cerberus would be more appropriate for a Houndoom evolution rather than a Mega Evolution, it's still disappointing that we could have got a much better design for Mega Houndoom. Once again, we reach another Gen 1 Pokemon that has not fared too well over the years. That being Scyther. And Scyther is a pretty awesome bug Pokemon. Yeah, bug flying Pokemon, even though it can't fly. I guess that's one of the reasons why it is disappointing. It has a pretty awesome stat total and distribution with great attack and speed. And its attack move pool is pretty awesome and has some good variety to it that is pretty good to use. So what's the issue? Well, I think you already know. It is just completely eclipsed by its evolution Scizor, even though Scizor has the same base stat total as its pre-evolution, which is just weird. Scissor just looks so much cooler with its slick red design and the fact that it's a bug steel type, one of the best types out there with a lot of resistances and only being weak to fire, even though it is a lethal weakness. It may be slower, but it has agility as well as bullet punch for priority. One of the best priorities you can get for Scissor, especially since it has Technician. And you see where I'm going with this? There's nothing that Scyther can do that Scissor can't do better. Heck, even Heracross and Pinsir can be considered better than Scyther. Even with them having the same 500 base stat total, they have better distributions and better attacks. Considering that Scyther is the only bug in the segment that I mentioned that didn't get a Mega Evolution, it's just painful at this point. Now usually I don't pair two Pokemon in the same spot on a countdown, but considering how similar these two Pokemon are and how they both are disappointing in similar ways, there's no way I couldn't exclude both Solrock and Lunatone. Their designs are actually kind of boring, and I wish they were more vibrant to kind of reflect the actual colors that we see from the lone star that radiates our galaxy and our sole natural satellite. On top of that, the difference between Solrock and Lunatone is that Solrock is more physically focused, whereas Lunatone is more specially focused. And while their move pools are pretty creative and reflect the type of moves you would expect them to learn, I guess, it still isn't quite enough. I would say that Lunatone is technically better than Solrock because with Solrock being physically focused, it can't really access many psychic type attacks, as well as the creative attacks it can learn through TMs. In fact, most of its physical moves are mainly just rock and ground attacks, as well as acrobatics, flare blitz. Solrock's only physical psychic type attack, Zen Headbutt, can only be learned through the move tutor, I'm pretty sure. But Lunatone, being specially focused, has more access to psychic attacks. It also can learn Power Gem, on top of Moonblast, let's not forget that. So it can learn stuff like Charge Beam, Ice Beam, Grass Knot, Solar Beam, etc., allowing it to cover much more weaknesses and have a better type coverage. Even so, you're better off just using Claydol, since Claydol has much more of a defensive focus, as well as very similar move pool to Lunatone. And considering he doesn't have a focus in either attack stat, you can make it more customizable to your liking, even though it doesn't really have any way to recover, just ways to boost its stats. But it also learns Rapid Spin, so it has that going for it too. However, the biggest reason why Lunatone and Solrock are here to begin with is pretty straightforward. You have games that are named after the very concepts that these two Pokemon are based on, and you don't have a single thought of putting those two Pokemon in those games. We could have got something so cool to do with Solrock or Lunatone in Pokemon Sun or Moon. They could have gotten a Mega Evolution. Heck, you could have made Cosmium fuse with either Solrock or Lunatone to get Solgaleo or Lunala. Why didn't they think of that? It just hurts so bad that these two Pokemon not only didn't get anything special from Pokemon Sun and Moon, but they didn't even get to appear in those games. I don't know if I can keep going on, honestly. This countdown's getting sad, but we're almost at number 1, so I'm not stopping now. Can a legendary Pokemon be disappointing? Well, absolutely. Even with this prestigious title that grants Pokemon strong canonical influence, as well as the hardest catch rate in the game, you're still bound to find some that suffer from issues like lazy designs or poor battle capabilities. I'm giving mythical Pokemon a pass here since Game Freak usually churns one out every year and very few of them are expected to live up to the legacy that me was left behind, despite the extra things like new forms, Mega Evolutions, and exclusive Z moves. But when it comes to the mascot legendary, the very Pokemon that you are using to promote your game, you have to go big or go home, and Game Freak knows this. You can look at any mascot legendary and find a Pokemon with an awesome design, a brilliant concept that gives it life, and awesome battle prowess. They're basically the Pokemon equivalent of summons. And ever since Generation 3, the two Eidolons are usually accompanied by a third one, who gets about 1 or 2 games in the same generation where they steal the show and show their significance over the other two. Rayquaza is literally the only Pokemon that could interfere with Groudon and Kyogre's battle and set balance to the ecosystem of Hoenn. Giratina was summoned by the evil Team Galactic boss Cyrus, and it came in as this terrifying eldritch abomination that basically opened the gates to the Pokemon equivalent of hell. Kyurem was basically a super weapon used by Team Plasma to spread terrorism across Unova. And just when you thought you could stop it, Ghetsis fuses it with either Zekrom or Reshiram to turn it into a terrifying beast that could freeze the entire region. Necrozma not only completely bodies Guzma and Lucamine, but also forces itself to fuse with either Solgaleo or Lunala to steal the light from your world. From there, you have to go to Ultra Megalopolis to face it in its final form, which is by far the biggest difficulty spike in any Pokemon game. But wait, I'm forgetting a third legendary, ain't I? I don't know how I could have forgot it since I made a video trying to explain its lore when it was revealed in late 2015. And while Zygarde isn't necessarily the worst legendary out there, it was fairly underwhelming when it was introduced to us. The serpent design is alright, but maybe the two-tone color scheme didn't go that well. Also, its shiny is pretty ugly. And while I will say its defense is pretty good, the fact that its base stat total is 600 is a bit of a shame considering how many other dragons also have a 600 base stat total, including Garchomp, another dragon and ground type Pokemon who has a huge reputation of wrecking house. It also kind of sucks that Zygarde's attack move pool doesn't have very much type coverage unless you take it to a move tutor. Its signature move, Land's Wrath, is basically just a less powerful version of Earthquake. It doesn't even have that big of an advantage over Yveltal or Xerneas, despite the fact that its ability Aura Break is supposed to cancel out their abilities. Both Xerneas and Yveltal are immune to one of Zygarde's stab moves. So from there we still have a bit of a decent dragon type, which isn't too bad. And besides, it's the third out of a triangle of legendaries. It's gonna get its own game, right? And there was plenty of excitement when it was revealed that the new X and Y movie was gonna focus on Zygarde, and that Zygarde would have new forms. A 10% form, which looks like a dog, its 50% form, which is the serpent form we've already seen, and a complete form, which looks like a giant mech beast. I was pretty excited for this, despite my confusion as I expressed in my video. But then the Pokemon Direct revealed that we were just going to get a new generation. No follow-up to Pokemon X and Y. This left me so confused as to what they were going to do with Zygarde. But hey, this was addressed when they revealed that yes, Zygarde's new forms were going to be in this game, as well as a few new exclusive attacks, such as Gore Enforcer, 1,000 Arrows, and 1,000 Waves. And hey, while you were exploring Alola, you could pick up Zygarde cells, which you could put into the Zygarde cube. And once you had enough of them, you could obtain your own Zygarde. However, with Sun and Moon introducing so many new things to the series, such as Ride Pokemon, Z Crystals, Island Trials, Alolan Forms, and much more, I easily overlooked the Zygarde side quest. On top of that, Zygarde 10% is basically a decent physical sweeper, and Zygarde Complete Form is very similar to Zygarde 50%, except more damage spongy-ish. While this does make it very durable and overall a stronger Pokemon, it's not as interesting as something like Black or White Kyurem or Ultra Necrozma. Even its signature moves, while fairly solid attacks that each have their own perks, are better suited for double battles. Whereas single battles, you can find more powerful attacks that do the job a lot better. Overall, the fact that Zygarde started out as a disappointing legendary Pokemon and didn't have its full potential fulfilled by not getting its own game and being relegated to a side quest that even itself got thrown out in favor of totem stickers in the Ultra games, you get the picture. Zygarde is by far the most disappointing Pokemon that I have encountered. And that is it. Thank you for watching this Pokemon Countdown. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me, or you can check out my bro Snooplax's channel, where he's showing hacked Super Smash Bros. 64 stages, which you should probably check out. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.